When I first accepted the invitation to be one of tonight's storytellers, I was nervous. But then I got the email that sort of gave the outline and the guidelines and the times and the dates, and it had the theme. The theme was imperfections. And I thought, that's awesome. I'm an expert. My life has been a whole series of imperfections. I'm going to nail this. So let me explain what I mean by that. I had a good family, a solid mom and dad that were always together, two little sisters that adored their big brother, every opportunity in the world to be successful, to be normal. But that's not what happened. From the time that I was about 11 or 12 years old, I started smoking cigarettes behind 7-Eleven with David Garcia. I started smoking marijuana. I started stealing liquor from my dad's cabinet. And it didn't take long for those habits to turn into being sneaky, to lying, to doing other drugs. By the time I was in 9th grade, I was selling drugs. And by the time I graduated from high school, I was a full-blown drug addict, leading a completely duplicitous life. Somehow, I managed to stay a half a step ahead of myself and the law for many, many years until I was introduced to methamphetamine in my early 30s. That's when my little life of imperfections turned into a full-blown, full-raging dumpster fire. It was all bad and got worse. Over the next few years, I was arrested about 25 times. I spent a year in prison. I lost my family. I lost all my friends. In the end, I was living in my storage unit. Somehow, by the grace of God, I got arrested again, which wound up being the last time I was ever arrested. It was in 2005. I'd managed to get arrested 3 times in the span of 11 months for cooking methamphetamine, for trafficking, for distribution, for all the stupid stuff that goes with it. So I woke up in October of 2005 facing 13 felonies and, at least on paper, over 50 years in prison. At the time, I was 50 years old. Do the math. Somehow, I can only say by divine intervention, I had an empathetic judge give me an opportunity to, instead of go to prison for a long, long time, to go instead to a place called Delancey Street. It's what you call a therapeutic community, not a rehab per se. They don't even talk about drugs. It's a boot campish life skills academy that teaches men and women that are broken and lost, like I certainly was, how to be honest, contributing members of their community and living a law-abiding, ordered life. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a 2-year commitment. The judge said, you can go here for 2 years, or you can go here for about 5 times that long. Pretty much a no-brainer. So I went to Delancey Street, and I was just going to do my 2 years and then get out and, I don't know, go back to my storage unit. I don't know what my plan was. But instead, when I was there, getting myself handed to me day after day, getting told about who I was and how I could be a better human, I started to like it. I kind of liked telling the truth. I kind of liked being trusted. I kind of liked being able to be depended upon. So I not only stayed the 2 years that I had to get out of all that prison time, I stayed 6. And I completely reinvented my life. I attacked it with vigor, and I became a person I had never known. While I was there, in my last year of my commitment, on a home visit, I went to Albuquerque and visited my sister and her brother-in-law, and they took me to a barbecue. And while I was there was a chair next to a pretty woman, and I sat down next to her, and we started talking. About 3 or 3.5 hours later, my sister tapped me on the shoulder and said, it's time to go. I couldn't believe it. It felt like it'd been 15 minutes. I met a woman named Maureen. We called her Mimi. She was delightful. She was smart. She was pretty. She was elegant. She was just had good juju, you know? You could tell she was a good person. She was the kind of person that I wanted to be and the kind of person I wanted to associate with, having spent these long, hard 6 years reinventing myself from the liar and cheat and thief I had been for 37 years. She gave me her phone number, said, give me a call. Now, because of where I was staying at Delancey Street, they have very strict visitation, and you don't get many phone calls, and it's just not the way it goes. So I only talked to her about once or twice a month for the next year. I saw her twice in that year. That time, 2 more times. That time, and then 1 more home visit, and then one time, her and my sister flew out to Los Angeles for a 4-hour visit with me at Delancey Street. That's the only time I saw Mimi in all this time. Other than that, it was just those occasional phone calls and letters. Lots of letters. But here's the funny part. In those letters or through those letters, I fell in love. I knew her more intimately and I loved her more deeply than the 2 wives that I had ruined marriages with because of who I was at the time. And it was the only relationship I'd ever had that didn't have drugs at the foundation of it. It was awesome. Old-fashioned love. So anyway, as I got close to graduation, Mimi and I had plans. We were going to spend a life together. I was going to go up to the oil fields where a lot of graduates had gone and they were making all this obscene money up in North Dakota. And our plan was I'd go up there and make some of that good money too, and then come back to Albuquerque and we would cobble a life together. It was a great plan. And that's what I did. And on one of those trips down to Albuquerque, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. And her daughter Katie said yes, who I loved just as much as I loved Mimi. And then another interesting thing happened. A group of philanthropists from Salt Lake City were trying to put together a place just like Delancey Street. And somehow I was one of the 2 people they recruited to come to Salt Lake as the founding directors and build this place. How awesome was that? I was going to get a chance to build a place just like the one that saved my life. Mimi was excited, Katie was excited, I was excited. We changed our plans. Now instead of Albuquerque, we were all going to go to Salt Lake. I'd go ahead of them. They'd wrap up things in Albuquerque. We'd get out there. I'd get things started in Salt Lake, and then we'd all cobble this beautiful life together in Salt Lake. Everything was going perfect. I couldn't believe, after the 35 years I'd lived, all the debauchery and mayhem and everything that represented my life, everything had come together. I had to pinch myself every once in a while just to know it was real. Anyway, I was in Salt Lake one time. Mimi hurt her shoulder at the gym. She went to get an x-ray. She thought she had torn her rotator cuff or something. They called her back on the x-ray and wanted her to come in the next day and take some more x-rays, read this one. She went in. They weren't worried about the shoulder. They were worried about something they saw in her lung. To make a long story short, she had stage 4 cancer. And shortly after that x-ray, they told her she had about 6 or 12 months to live. So now, instead of Mimi and I planning our wedding, we were planning her end of life. I cannot tell you how hard that was for me. After a worthless life and being a terrible human, finally feeling like I found something beautiful, and I did in Mimi. Now everything had changed. No more Salt Lake, no more dreams, none of it. Now we just had to figure out what to do with the next year of our life. I mean, we faked it, and we tried to put on a good face, and we said we were going to beat it, and she did all the conventional treatments and a lot of unconventional treatments, and, we kept a good face on for Katie, but she was getting weaker, and she was losing weight, and we both knew what we never talked about, that we were going to lose this fight. And then we had that fateful doctor appointment. The one where they say, Mimi, You should get your affairs in order. You should quit work if you can. You should spend time with your daughter. You should do whatever makes you happy, but you should be prepared. It was a long drive home in the car from that doctor appointment. We didn't say a word. When we got to her apartment, she laid down. She was tired. She was always tired. I propped up against the headboard and held her hand in silence. And then I started to cry. Then I started to get mad. I was mad at God. I was mad at me. I was mad at Mimi. I was mad at all of you too, by the way. I just didn't know you yet. I was mad at everybody. I yelled, I screamed, I cried. I threw the pillow across the room and knocked the lamp off the table. I got up and stamped around. I said it's not fair. I've been a liar, a cheat, a thief, a terrible human. I've had guns in my mouth. I've held knives to people's throats. I've done so many horrible things. I've done so many drugs. I should be dead 10 times over. And I'm as healthy as a horse. You are still friends with everybody you know from kindergarten. You don't cuss. You don't drink. You've never smoked a cigarette. Your husband died and you still raised a beautiful daughter. Everybody loves you. You're the best human I've ever met and you're dying. It's not fair, I said. And she listened to all of it. And then she said, "Are you done? Sit down." Now she took my hand. And she said, "Look, Alan, it is not up to you to decide what's fair or what's not. This is God's will. It's not my decision. It's not your decision. But you don't need to feel sorry for me. And you sure don't need to feel sorry for you. What you need to do is go back to Salt Lake and save as many lives as you can. You have a gift. You're right. You should be dead, but you're not. That's also God's will. The reason you're alive is because He's not done with you, and you're not done with your work. So leave me be, go back to Salt Lake, and if you can't save my life, save as many as you can. That's what you should do. Am I clear?" I said, "Yes, Mimi." We laid there all night. We didn't say much the rest of the night. The next morning, a couple of times before she took me to the airport, I tried to say something, and she put her hands to my lips as if to say, no. We went to the airport, and as we were pulling up to the curb, she said, "Alan, I'm not going to ask you to understand. I'm just going to ask you not to argue with me and to please honor my wishes. But no more trips home. I don't want you to see me like this, and I don't want you to see me like I'm going to be. I want you to remember me like we were." So we cried a little bit more, and I got out of the car and got on the airplane. Over the next couple of months, we talked, but less frequently. And finally, she told me, "Alan, I'd rather if we didn't talk anymore. It's harder to talk to you than it is not to. I want to remember us the way we were, and I want you to remember me the way we were. I have my family here. I don't need you. You do what you do. I love you." And that was the last time I spoke to her. I went to her funeral, of course, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see that many people gathered in someone's honor that was such a beautiful, tender, gentle, kind human being. And over time, I learned that the best gift that Mimi ever gave me was being able to watch the strength, the dignity, and the grace with which she died. It was the greatest gift I've ever been given. It taught me how to live. Now I'm married, and I love my wife, Nicole, very much. But I will tell you this. There is no way I would be able to love her as deeply and as genuinely as I do, or appreciate our life as much as I do, if it hadn't been for Mimi. She taught me how to love Nicole. And Nicole would be the first person to give Mimi credit for that. We both love Mimi for what she gave us. So what I'm here to tell you is you have imperfections in your life, I'm sure. You don't maybe have a dumpster fire going like I did, but you've got imperfections. And instead of focusing on those, instead of letting those tie you down and hold you back, just remember that in all of our imperfections, sometimes you can find a piece of perfection that will make you appreciate everything you have. I know I do.